For centuries, the Galactic empires expanded, conquering world after world, absorbing countless species into their sprawling domains. But there was a limit, an unseen wall where every map simply ended. Human space. None dared venture beyond. None questioned why. The galaxy's greatest minds whispered theories, but fear bound their tongues. The Cathari, a proud and ancient race, had mapped thousands of stars, their empire reaching further than any other. Yet when they approached human borders, their explorers vanished. No distress signals, no wreckage, only silence. The Galactic Council, a coalition of the universe's mightiest species, debated the human enigma for generations. Humanity was an anomaly, a species that had clawed its way to the stars, not through diplomacy or steady progress, but through bloodshed, war, and reckless tenacity. They expanded like wildfire, violent, erratic, unstoppable. Then, without warning, they halted. Their ships ceased exploring. Their colonies never crossed an unseen line. No wars, no negotiations, no further expansion. They had drawn a line in the stars, and none dared step over it. But someone had to. Ambassador Corinve of the Zixari Dominion had dedicated his life to understanding humanity. They were a paradox, fragile yet terrifying, weak yet impossible to break. He devoured reports, analyzed stories, and sensed the dread that clouded council discussions of Earth. Now he had his chance. For the first time in a century, humans had extended an invitation. A single ship could enter their territory to meet on a core world. It was an honor, a warning. Corin accepted. He had to. No. As his ship crossed the invisible boundary, an unnatural silence fell. The stars beyond seemed dimmer, the void heavier. Instruments flickered, detecting distortions. Space, once familiar, turned unknowable. Then came a message. "Welcome to our space, Ambassador Vesh. We hope you enjoy your stay." Their voices were calm, too calm. Corin had always believed the universe obeyed certain rules. Deep down, he knew. Humans had found something here, something no one else had, and made sure none would ever find it again. The human escort ship guided Corin's vessel deeper into the unknown. Unlike the Council's grand warships, it was sleek, modest, and unsettling. It moved with uncanny precision, each motion deliberate, almost alive. Corin had seen battleships, carriers, and diplomatic cruisers. This was something else entirely. His crew watched silently, unease etched into their faces. Sensors continued to flicker, struggling to read the void around them, as if space itself was warped, alien. The human voice returned. "We are approaching Saul. Prepare for descent." The words were crisp, perfectly spoken, but hollow, artificial. Corin had encountered humans before, merchants, envoys, bold and arrogant. But these were different. The screen blinked, and Earth came into view. It was a paradox. Sprawling megastructures pierced the clouds, yet vast, untouched wilderness endured, civilization and primal wilderness in impossible balance. The planet seemed alive, not just biologically, but with something older, deeper. Entering the atmosphere, Corin felt it instantly, a presence pressing against his mind. Not physical, not measurable, but undeniable. His crew felt it too. "Something's wrong," one whispered. The ship landed. Doors opened. Humans waited outside, their faces unreadable. They wore simple, functional uniforms, no gold, no jewels, no ostentation. A woman with piercing grey eyes stepped forward. "Ambassador Vesh," she said. "Welcome to Earth." Corin studied her, seeking deceit, clues, anything. He found none, only certainty. They knew something the rest of the galaxy could never understand, and he was about to find out why. He stepped onto the landing platform, senses overwhelmed by Earth's presence. The air was dense, filled with unfamiliar scents. alien flora, industrial metal, and something other. The human woman's gaze never wavered. "I am Director Helena Graves," she said. "You must be tired from your journey." Her voice was polite, calm yet final, not a threat, not an offer, a certainty. "My crew," Corin began. Helena raised a hand. "They will be accommodated," she said. "But you were requested alone." Corin stiffened. Unusual, every diplomatic encounter involved aides, guards, formalities, but humans rewrote rules as easily as breathing. He glanced back. His crew's unease was obvious, but they could do nothing. He nodded, signaling compliance. The ship's doors sealed. Alone now, Corin followed Helena to a black, unmarked transport. He hesitated, then entered. The ride was silent. No conversation, no windows. Corin forced himself to stay calm. He had faced tyrants and emperors. But beside this woman, in this silent machine, he felt a new emotion. Dread. At last, the vehicle stopped. The doors opened onto a vast underground. Complex. The architecture was unsettling, smooth, seamless, precise, not crude, not ornamental, pure alien functionality. "Follow me," Helena said. She led him through a series of hallways, deeper into the facility. The walls were lined with massive doors, each marked only by a series of numbers. No symbols, no explanations. The air grew colder. Finally, they reached a door unlike the others. It was larger, thicker. It hummed with a power Corin could feel in his bones. Helena placed her hand against a panel, and the door slid open. Inside, the room was dark. A single massive window overlooked something below, shrouded in shadows. Corin stepped closer, peering through the glass. Then the lights flickered on. He saw it. His breath caught in his throat. His mind recoiled, struggling to comprehend what lay beneath. It was alive, it was enormous, and it was waiting. Corin turned to Helena, his voice barely a whisper. "What is that?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "That," she said, "is why no one crosses into human space." Corin's breath came in short, shallow bursts. His twin hearts pounded against his ribs as he stared through the reinforced glass, struggling to process what he was seeing. The chamber. Below stretched impossibly far into darkness, its depths illuminated only by the cold glow of hidden lights embedded in the walls. And at the very center of it all was something. The creature, if it could even be called that, was vast beyond comprehension, its form shifting and undulating as if it wasn't entirely bound by the laws of this universe. It had no defined shape, no clear anatomy, yet his mind insisted on trying to impose logic onto it. One moment it seemed an amorphous mass of writhing tendrils. The next, it hinted at something vaguely humanoid, its elongated limbs twitching, in slow, deliberate motions. But the worst part, the part that made his stomach churn, was the feeling of awareness. It was looking at him, not with eyes, there were no eyes, but Corin could feel its attention settle on him, seeping into his very being like an oil slick spreading through water. His instincts screamed at him to run, to flee, to put as much distance as possible between himself and the entity imprisoned below, but his body wouldn't move. What is that?" he managed to rasp, forcing the words past dry lips. Helena Graves stood beside him, arms folded behind her back, her expression unreadable. She watched Corin, studying his reaction more than the thing below. "This is what we found," she said quietly. "Or more accurately, what found us." Corin tore his gaze away from the creature and turned to her, desperate for an explanation. "You captured it," he demanded. How?" Helena let out a slow breath. "No, Ambassador. We didn't capture it. We contained it." Corin's mind reeled. Containment was a dangerous word. It implied something too powerful, too dangerous to be allowed free, something requiring constant vigilance. He had encountered species that dabbled in such things, creatures from the fringes of the known universe that needed entire planets to serve as prisons. But this was different. This wasn't a being they had found on some distant world. This was something humans had encountered within their own space, and they had locked it away. His fingers curled against the railing as he tried to keep his voice steady. Where did it come from? Helena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned back toward the glass, watching the entity below. Its shifting form pulsed, reacting to their presence. "We don't know," she admitted. "We only know that they exist, and that we are not meant to see them." A chill ran down Corin's spine. "They," he swallowed hard. "How many?" Helena finally looked at him, her grey eyes sharp and unwavering. "Too many." Silence filled the observation deck. Corin's mind raced with possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. He had always believed that space, for all its mysteries, followed certain rules. Civilizations rose and fell, empires clashed, wars were fought, and treaties signed. But this was something else, something older, something deeper, something that was never supposed to be known. "And this," Corin whispered, barely able to form the words, "is why no one crosses into human space." Helena nodded. The other. "Empires assume we stopped expanding out of caution, that we reached the limits of our ambition." She turned back toward the creature, her face expressionless. "But the truth is, we went too far, we saw too much, and we learned the one thing no other species in the galaxy seems to understand." Corin could barely breathe. "And what is that?" Helena's voice was calm, almost too calm. "That we were never alone." Corin felt the weight of those words settle over him like a suffocating blanket. His people, the Zixari, had always prided themselves on their knowledge, their vast archives of star charts and ancient histories. They had mapped thousands of systems, encountered hundreds of species, waged wars, and brokered peace. Yet, in all their records, in all their explorations, they had never encountered anything like this. "You should leave," Helena said, her voice softer now. Corin's gaze snapped to her. "What?" She turned fully to face him, her expression unreadable. "We granted you this meeting because we knew you would ask," she said. "We knew that eventually someone on the council would push too far. That curiosity would get the better of one of you." Corin felt a sharp chill settle in his gut. "You're warning me," Helena gave a small nod. "We don't stop others from crossing into human space because of secrecy or power," she said. "We do it because we're containing something. And if the rest of the galaxy starts poking around where it shouldn't, we can't guarantee that containment will hold." The meaning of her words sank into him like ice. The humans weren't isolationists. They weren't hoarding secrets for themselves. They were standing at the edge of something terrible, holding the line. And if that line broke, Corin felt his hands shaking. He wanted to argue, to demand answers, to insist that the Galactic Council had a right to know the full truth. But deep in his soul, he understood. Some truths were better left buried. Some doors were never meant to be opened. And the humans, reckless and terrifying as they were, had learned that lesson the hard way. Corin exhaled slowly and stepped away from the glass. "Take me back to my ship." Helena nodded once. No argument, no further discussion, just quiet understanding. As they walked away from the observation deck, Corin forced himself not to look back, not to glance one last time at the shifting, impossible thing in the chamber below, but as the doors slid shut behind him, he heard it, a whisper, a voice not meant for mortal ears. "We see you." Corin did not speak for the rest of the journey, because for the first time in his life, he truly understood fear. The journey back to his ship was suffocating. Corin sat in silence, his mind spinning with the weight of what he had just witnessed. The transport moved with eerie precision, gliding through the underground corridors without a single jolt or hesitation. Every second that passed, the whisper echoed in his mind, "We see you." The words had no source, no mouth to speak them, and yet he had heard them as clearly as if they had been whispered into his ear. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to focus. He was a diplomat, an ambassador. He had dealt with the most cunning, manipulative beings in the galaxy. He had stood before warlords, debated with rulers who held the fates of entire worlds in their hands, and yet nothing had prepared him for this. Across from him, Helena Graves sat with her usual composure, arms folded, gaze fixed ahead. She had not spoken since they left the chamber. She didn't need to. Finally, Corin found his voice. It was quieter than he intended. "You've known about them for a long time," Helena nodded. "Longer than you'd believe," Corin exhaled sharply. "And you've kept it from the rest of the galaxy all this time." A small, humorless smile flickered across her lips. "Would you have done any different?" He wanted to say yes. He wanted to insist that the Galactic Council had a right to know, that every species should be united against a threat of this magnitude. But the words died before they could leave his mouth. Because deep down, he knew the answer. He wouldn't have done any different. Because this wasn't a war. This wasn't an enemy that could be fought with fleets and weapons. It was something else, something older, something beyond the comprehension of any species that still believed it was in control of the universe. Corin swallowed hard. "How many have seen it?" Helena's expression darkened. "Few leave," she said. "Fewer still with their sanity intact." A shiver ran down Corin's spine. "You will return to your people," she continued, her voice low but steady. "You will tell them that humanity refuses to open its borders, that we will not negotiate our stance. And if they push further," she turned her head, meeting his gaze fully. For the first time, Corin saw it. Not fear, but something far colder. Resolve. "If they push," she said, "we won't stop them. But we will not be responsible for what happens next." A heavy silence settled between them. Corin exhaled slowly, his mind racing through the implications. If he told the Council the truth, they would demand evidence. They would send scouts, then research teams, then warships. They would probe the depths of human space, believing themselves prepared for whatever they might find. But they weren't prepared. Not for this. The transport shuddered to a halt. The doors slid open, revealing the landing platform. His ship waited where he had left it, his crew standing tensely at the base of the ramp. They straightened at his approach, their eyes flickering. Between Corin and the human escorts, he turned to Helena one last time. "You're not telling me everything," he said, her lips pressed into a thin line. "No," she admitted. "I'm not." He considered pressing further, demanding answers, but in the end he didn't. Some knowledge wasn't meant to be gained. Without another word, he strode toward his ship. His crew followed silently, sensing the gravity of his mood. The doors sealed behind them, and Corin moved directly to the command deck. "Prepare for immediate departure," he ordered. The ship's engines roared to life. As they ascended, leaving Earth behind, Corin cast one final glance at the shrinking blue sphere. It wasn't an empire. It wasn't a war-hungry dominion seeking expansion. It was a wall, thin, fragile, and standing between the known galaxy, and something no one should ever see. And for the first time, Corin prayed it would hold, because if it didn't, nothing would. As the ship broke free from Earth's gravity, Corin remained at the viewport, watching Earth fade into the darkness. His twin hearts thundered in his chest, his mind replaying every moment of the encounter. Behind him, his crew remained silent, sensing the weight of his silence. Earth should have felt like just another inhabited world, one among countless, others across the stars, but now it felt different. It was a prison, and for the first time in his life, Corin feared what was trapped inside. "Ambassador," a voice cut through the silence. "Commander Vike, his second-in-command. Are we clear to depart?" Corin nodded, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Set course for the council station. No delays." Vike hesitated. "Are we not filing a report with the humans before departure?" "No," Corin said sharply. "We leave now." There was a pause before Vake nodded and turned to relay the orders. The crew, though puzzled, obeyed without question. The ship's hum deepened as they powered up for faster-than-light travel. Corin took his seat at the command console, his hands gripping the armrests tighter than necessary. Helena's final words echoed through his mind. "We won't stop them. But we won't be responsible for what happens next." It hadn't been a warning, it had been a promise. The ship lurched forward, stars streaking past the viewport as they accelerated into the void, and yet, no matter how far they traveled, Corin could still feel it, the weight of unseen eyes. The journey back to the Galactic Council station was uneventful, but Corin found no comfort in it. Every moment of silence, every stretch of empty space felt heavier than before. He spent the hours reviewing his diplomatic notes, rewriting his report again and again, agonizing over what to reveal and what to hide. When the station finally loomed into view, floating on the edge of neutral space, Corin straightened his uniform and drew a deep breath. The station, a patchwork blend of a dozen species architecture, had once seemed impressive. Now it felt small. The docking clamps locked. The airlock hissed open. An escort of officials awaited him. Word had already spread. He had met with the humans. A formal meeting was scheduled within the hour. Corin had no time to prepare further. As he walked through the pristine halls toward the council chambers, he kept his expression blank, his mind carefully crafting each word he would say. When the grand doors opened, dozens of representatives from across the galaxy turned their gaze to him, expectant. He took his place at the center of the chamber, standing tall under the weight of their scrutiny. "The negotiations with humanity have concluded," Corin began, his voice steady. "Their stance remains unchanged. They will not expand. They will not open their borders, and they will not discuss the reasons behind their isolation." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Already he could see the discontent growing, the aggressive factions sharpening their demands. Corin inhaled slowly. Now was the moment of decision. Tell the truth and risk catastrophe, or lie and pray the galaxy never learned what lay beyond human space. He exhaled, keeping his voice calm, measured. Humanity has chosen their path. I strongly advise the Council to respect it. Silence. Then the room erupted, voices rising in anger, confusion, disbelief. Corin stood motionless, letting the storm wash over him. He had expected this. The Council had spent centuries cataloguing every corner of the known universe. To be blocked by a younger species, it was an insult they would not easily accept. A voice cut through the chaos. "Ambassador Corin." He turned toward the speaker, High Chancellor Veer of the Kavar Dominion, a towering figure of green-scaled skin and piercing golden eyes. Veer rose from his seat. Unlike the others, his voice carried no anger, only cold. "A calculation. You expect us to accept this answer?" Veer asked, his gaze sharp and unblinking. "To simply respect their refusal?" Corin kept his expression neutral. "Yes." A ripple of dissatisfaction spread across the chamber. Veer's lips curled into something resembling a smile. "And why, Ambassador, should we do that?" He leaned forward, slightly predatory. "You are asking the Council to abandon a region of space simply because the humans said so. You must understand how weak that sounds." Corin's fingers twitched at his sides. "It is not weakness," he said carefully. "It is wisdom." Veer's golden eyes narrowed. Then share this wisdom with us. The chamber stilled. All eyes turned to Corin. He felt his twin hearts hammer against his ribs. This was it. Tell the full truth, and they would demand proof. Proof would mean expeditions. Expeditions would mean ships entering human space, and then the thing that had whispered to him would notice, would see them. Corin drew a slow, steady breath. The humans have remained within their borders for centuries, he said. They do not seek conquest. They do not interfere in the affairs of others. If they desired war, they would have waged it long ago. If they had sought allies, they would have found them. Instead, they remain within their territory, not because of us, but because of something they refuse to name. Corin let the weight of his words hang heavy before continuing. And if a species, as relentless as humanity, refuses to expand, perhaps we should ask why, before demanding they step aside. Veer's golden eyes gleamed, sharp with suspicion. Or, he countered, perhaps they have found something valuable within their space and intend to keep it hidden. Corin's jaw tightened. Dangerous ground. The Kavar Dominion was among the Council's most ambitious factions. They didn't see barriers, they saw opportunities. If Verak believed humanity was concealing something of worth, he would argue for intervention, maybe even invasion. The humans made no threats, Corin said evenly. They did not posture. They did not deceive. They made one thing perfectly clear. He locked eyes with Veer. If we enter their space, they will not protect us. They will not take responsibility for what happens to those who ignore their warning. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Representatives glanced at each other, uncertainty flickering across once confident faces. Yet Veer remained unmoved. And, you believe them? He asked, voice low and unimpressed. Corin met his gaze without flinching. Yes. Verak studied him for a long, tense moment, then scoffed lightly and leaned back in his seat. Your caution is noted, Ambassador. But Corin knew this was far from over. Veer wasn't convinced, and neither were others. As the debate churned on, Corin's unease only deepened. He had warned them, but it would not be enough. Too many in this room saw mystery not as a warning, but as an invitation. They would send ships. They would probe the forbidden borders. And when they did, something would notice. Corin clenched his hands tightly beneath the table, a cold dread sinking into his bones. He could only hope that when the Council finally understood the truth, it wouldn't already be too late. The Council session dragged for hours, debates, counter-arguments, political posturing. Some representatives insisted humanity's secrecy demanded investigation. Others urged patience and diplomacy, but Corin knew the Council was not an institution built on patience. By the time the meeting ended, no formal action had been taken. Yet Corin saw it in their eyes. The gears were turning. The powerful factions, especially the Kavar Dominion, would not let the mystery stand. As he left the chamber, his second-in-command, Velik, fell into step beside him. They're going to send ships, Corin said, exhaling heavily. I know, Velik replied. They won't listen. I know. They walked in silence through the grand halls of the station. Beyond the wide windows, the stars burned cold and indifferent, ships coming and going in a ceaseless ballet of light. Corin wondered how many of those ships would never return once. They crossed the wrong line. Velik hesitated, then asked quietly, What exactly did you see on Earth? Corin stopped walking. His mind flashed back to that underground chamber, the crushing pressure, the way reality itself seemed to warp and strain around the hidden thing. How could he explain it? He turned to Velik, his voice grim. I saw something I don't understand, he said. He paused. And I don't want to understand it. For the first time, Velik looked truly shaken. That bad? Corin exhaled slowly. Worse, they resumed walking, the silence between them heavier than before. A little fear was better than reckless curiosity. When they reached their ship, Corin wasted no time. He didn't want to linger. He had done his duty. Now, all he could do was wait. As their ship detached from the station and slipped into neutral space, Corin allowed himself a fleeting moment of relief. The warning had been delivered. The rest was out of his hands. Or so he thought. 3 weeks later, the distress call came. Corin was in his quarters when the alert lit up his screen. His heart hammered as he scanned the report. A Kavar scouting vessel missing in human space. More reports followed. Other ships sent to investigate vanished. No wreckage, no beacons, no survivors, only silence. The council spiraled into chaos. The Kavar Dominion demanded answers. Humanity offered none. They simply repeated the same message. Do not come here. Do not send more ships. We will not help you. Corin felt dread seep deep into his soul. This was it. The moment he had feared. Someone had ignored the warning, and something had woken up. An emergency session was called. Tensions boiled over. Some representatives demanded retaliation against humanity for their refusal to cooperate. Others, more cautious, urged restraint, sensing the presence of something far worse than diplomatic stubbornness. High Chancellor Veer was livid, slamming a clawed fist onto the table. "We have lost our people," he roared, "and the humans refuse to answer for it." Corin sat silently, his mind racing. Humanity wasn't responsible. Something else had taken the ships. He rose slowly to his feet. "Chancellor," he said, addressing Ver, "you believe humanity is withholding information. That may be true, but I urge you to consider, what if this is not their doing?" Veer's eyes burned with rage. Then who else could it be? Corin chose his words carefully. "You assume we are the only ones looking," he said quietly. "But what if something is looking back?" A hush fell over the chamber. The thought, the possibility, was almost too terrible to voice. Varric sneered. "If there is a threat, we must uncover it. We cannot allow humanity to dictate the limits of our knowledge." Corin's fists clenched. This reckless arrogance would doom them all. But before he could speak, again the emergency alarms blared. A new transmission had been received from the missing Kavar ship. The chamber froze as the recording played. The image was grainy, distorted by static, but the voice was unmistakably Kavar. "This is Scout Vessel Vorajay. We are lost." The voice trembled. Corin had never heard a Kavar sound afraid before. "They are here," the voice whispered. "Not human, not human. They are watching. We were wrong. We were—" Static burst across the signal, cutting the voice off. Then came something else, not a scream. Not a cry for help, a sound, a low, layered whisper, as if 1,000 unseen mouths spoke in terrible unison. No language Corin knew. Something deeper, something older, something wrong. Across the chamber, representatives gasped, clutched at. Their chests shuddered under the weight of the sound pressing down on them. Then, silence. The transmission ended. The horror remained. No one moved, no one spoke. Not until Veer, his voice tight with restrained fear, demanded, "Where did that signal originate?" A technician hesitated. It came from the far edge of human space." Veer's jaw tightened into a grim line. "Then we send a fleet." Corin's stomach dropped. "You can't be serious," he said. Vera turned to him, eyes burning. "We've lost ships, we've lost people, and you expect us to sit idly by while that thing speaks in our transmission?" Corin cut in sharply. "That was not Givor. It wasn't human. It was something else," Vera scoffed. "And what do you suggest? That we abandon our missing to whatever horror lurks out there?" Corin's mind raced. There had to be another way. Send a diplomatic envoy. Speak with the humans. They know what's out there. If we push into their space blindly, Virak slammed his fist onto the table. "Understanding is for cowards. Action is what we need." Corin clenched his fists. "If you send ships into human space, you won't just be dealing with the humans," he said, voice low. "You'll be dealing with whatever they're hiding from." For the first time, Vera hesitated, not because he was convinced, but because the fear in the room was tangible. The transmission had shaken the council. They all felt it, something unnatural in that whisper, something that defied comprehension. But warriors like Vera didn't yield to fear. They fought it, and Corin knew, deep down, no argument would stop him now. Vera turned away. "We mobilize a fleet." 2 standard weeks later, the fleet arrived at the edge of human space. Corin had not been invited. He had not been consulted. He had received only a brief, cold message from Vera. Stay out of the way, and so he did. Corin remained aboard his vessel, stationed at a distance, monitoring from afar, watching, waiting. At first, nothing happened. The Kava fleet sent out long-range scans. They found nothing, no wreckage, no human defenses mobilizing, just empty, endless space. And then the whispers began, not over comms, not on any known frequency, inside their minds. It started as an itch. At the back of their thoughts, a quiet presence, a sensation of being observed. Then the voices grew louder. Crew members began reporting strange phenomena, hearing things, whispers just beyond comprehension. And then the shadows came. They weren't ships, they weren't life forms, they were something else, something that Kava had no words for. They simply were, watching, waiting. One Kava vessel opened fire. That was when the screaming began. It didn't come over comms. It came from the ships themselves. Metal twisting, hulls bending as if unseen. Hands were crushing them from the inside out. Some ships tried to flee, but they vanished mid-flight, blinking out of existence without a trace. The flagship attempted to send a distress signal. The last words received by the council: "We were wrong." Then silence. The entire fleet was gone, not destroyed, not obliterated, simply erased, as if they had never existed at all. 3 days later, Corin sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the void beyond his viewport. He had known this would happen. He had tried to stop it, yet even he hadn't grasped the sheer final weight of it. The Kava Dominion was in chaos. The council was shattered. Even Virak, the unshakable, arrogant warrior, was simply gone, lost to whatever force had claimed the fleet. Humanity remained silent. No threats, no warnings, no reaction at all, as if this had been inevitable, as if it had happened before. Private message appeared on Corin's screen, anonymous, a single line of text. "We told you not to look." Corin closed his eyes. Somewhere in the darkness, something was awake now, and it knew they had seen it. The message sat on his screen, its meaning sinking into him like a stone sinking into a black ocean. "We told you not to look." Not a threat, not a warning, just a statement of fact. His hands curled into fists. The Kava fleet gone, not defeated, simply removed, and humanity. They hadn't celebrated. They hadn't retaliated. They had simply watched, unbothered, as if it were all expected. Corin exhaled slowly. He had one choice now, one chance to do what no one else had the sense to do. He had to speak with the humans. The journey to Earth was uneventful. No human ships intercepted him. No warnings sounded, and that unsettled him more than anything. They knew he was coming, and they weren't stopping him, which meant one of two things. Either they didn't see him as a threat, or they didn't see anyone as a threat anymore. Earth's surface was as unassuming as ever. Bright blue oceans, vast continents, cities stretching toward the sky. Technology far behind what other species had developed, and yet here humanity stood, untouched, unchallenged, unafraid. Helena Graves was waiting for him. She stood alone on an observation deck overlooking the City, hands folded behind her back, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "I was wondering when you'd show up," she said. Corin stopped a few paces away. "You knew this would happen." Helena tilted her head slightly. "We warned you." Corin's hands twitched. "You let them die." Her smirk faded. "No," she said quietly. Turning to face him fully, "We let them make their own choice." Frustration surged through him. "And what is it? The thing that took them? What did they wake up?" Helena studied him for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Then she sighed. "It's not a thing, Corin." He froze. Something in her voice made his skin crawl. "It's not a species, not a force, not even a god." She turned back to the city. "It's the space between things." Corin's pulse thundered in his ears. "I don't understand." "You don't need to," Helena said, voice distant. "We learned a long time ago. Some questions shouldn't be asked, some doors shouldn't be opened, but every species that rises, that hungers for more, they all make the same mistake. They think the void is empty." She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "But the void isn't empty, Corin. It's just silent, until someone makes the wrong kind of noise." His breath caught. The Cav fleet hadn't been destroyed. They had been heard, and something had answered. Corin shook his head. That doesn't make sense. How could you know all this?" Helena smiled, but it was a sad, tired smile. "Because we were the first ones to look." The realization struck Corin like a physical blow. Humanity had already made this mistake long ago, and survived. He stepped back, mind racing. "You're containing it," he said. "As much as we can," Helena replied. "For how long?" She exhaled. "For as long as we don't repeat the mistakes of others." Corin looked past her, out over the vast, thriving planet, a species that had stopped expanding, stopped reaching too far. A species that knew better than to disturb what should never be disturbed. And now he understood why the galactic maps ended at human space. Not because humans were a threat, but because they knew where the real threat lay, and the rest of the galaxy was too arrogant to listen. Corin turned away, his stomach churning. "What happens next?" Helena's voice was steady. "That depends." "On what?" She met his gaze, and, for the first time, Corin saw something ancient, something haunted lurking behind her eyes. "On whether the galaxy can learn to be quiet." Corin left Earth that day with more questions than answers. But one truth was certain. There was no war to fight, no enemy to defeat, just an endless, watching silence. And the terrible knowledge that somewhere out in the void, something was still listening.